Welcome back to Question Period. Continuing coverage today of our top story, U.S. President Donald Trump's announcement he's ending trade negotiations and increasing existing tariffs on Canadian goods by 10%. Trump says it's because of that Government of Ontario anti-tariff ad Premier Doug Ford had made featuring clips of former President Ronald Reagan.
Well, Canada lied. I mean, what they did was terrible. They made up a fake statement by President Reagan. Reagan was a big supporter of tariffs when needed.
It is the sole responsibility of the Government of Canada to have those discussions with the United States, and it's the best way forward. And as I say, we stand ready.
So what should the government's message to Canadians be? Our Sunday strategy session is here. Kathleen Monk is a former NDP strategist and director of communications to the late Jack Layton. James Moore is a former Conservative cabinet minister, and Scott Reid is former communications director to Prime Minister Paul Martin. Hi, everybody.
Hey there.
Good to see you, Scott. I'll start with you. A little bit of whiplash over the end of the week there. What is your initial impression of how this thing went down?
You know what? I like it, and I think Canadians like it. I like a little flash of strength. I like a little flash of steel. And, you know, Doug Ford's whole ambition was to capture the attention of the President of the United States, of the citizens of the United States. Well, then I think he rolled a Yahtzee, because he's certainly got that attention. And, you know, the president himself, of course, by screaming and squealing like a child without his toy, made certain that everybody in the States saw this ad, shared this ad. So I think we end up showing a little bit of strength, flexing a little bit of muscle. Trade talks with Trump, they're up, they're down, they're off, they're on. It's impossible to follow. We'll get back to where we need to. And if there's a deal, then there will be a deal. But I think that Canadians liked the fact that we threw a punch rather than just took punches.
James, what do you think?
Agree with all that, and look, you know, there's the bluster on the surface, but the waves happen on the surface. But what matters are the tides. But what really matters are the plates that result in the shifting of the tides that result in the waves. So the noise at the top of the surface, which is the Donald Trump daily, tweets and Truth Social stuff, is kind of grist for the mill. We've kind of conditioned ourselves to be kind of ready for it. And you'll remember as well, Vashi, back when we arrived at the Kuzma agreement, the NAFTA 2.0 agreement, there was a lot of noise in the final week or two as we got towards the final strokes of that agreement about whether or not the Americans were going to abrogate the deal, whether or not it was going to be torn up, whether or not they were going to walk away. So a lot of noise doesn't necessarily mean the end of things. President Trump is a temperamental person. He's getting a lot of pushback in the United States over the tearing down of the East Wing of the White House. There's a lot of stuff, happening in the news negative on the economic side, picking a fight with Canada. I mean, it's all just kind of noise. The substance of the Canada-U.S. relationship is deep and more than a century and a half deep, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon, in my view, in the long view. So, this is kind of noise now, but the substance of things will I think, carry the weight towards a better outcome.
It's kind of interesting, as James was talking, I was thinking of even my reaction reading the tweet. It's just like I no longer feel breathless about anything, nor do I want to convey that breathlessness to an audience. Like, we have kind of, in a way, and not to say there can't be very impactful things said and done, but like we've kind of become conditioned to these ups and downs in a way.
Yeah, and even something like the stock market is not reacting in the same way that you would expect it to. But I do think that this is political theater on a new order, on a higher order, if you will. Not only do you have presidents and prime ministers, you've got premiers weighing in, you've got the Pope weighing in. The Pope has weighed in on the state of the relationship between Canada and the U.S. And it's pretty remarkable. But what I find interesting is that just a couple of days ago, President Trump was actually almost kind of lauding the ad. He said, if I was Ontario, I'd do something similar to what Premier Ford had done with rolling out this Ontario taxpayer-funded ad. But I think that's why you have got to say that his tantrum that he had on Friday really wasn't random. It's more about retaliation, because the government finally, did what I think it should have done, which is it actually kind of took off that exemption on some of those big companies, right, on GM and on Stellantis, not letting them get away, had those counter tariffs put back on to those import tariffs put back on to some of those vehicles, because they did move all their stuff down south. So he's reacting to that potentially as well too, and saying, hey, and so that using that leverage, building up that head of steam, as James says, because we might be in the short strokes of some kind of a deal, and now this is really when the punches start to fly.
Here's what someone in the U.S. government told me, building off what Kathleen said, Scott, that it was news of that delivered by Greer to the president. News that we were viewing China as a strategic partnership delivered via Marco Rubio. News also delivered via Marco Rubio that Prime Minister Carney had said in an interview that if Netanyahu arrived in Canada, that he would be okay with an arrest at that point. And the conclusion of that, I was told by somebody in the U.S. government, was to convey, unlike Mexico, the relationship with Canada is just too much work. What does that tell you about what the future might look like?
Well, it's not encouraging, but again, maybe I'm like you guys. Maybe I've just sort of become like, inured to all of this. And the relationship with Canada has to occupy some time and interest on the part of those in the United States. It just must, because as James has pointed out, this relationship is deep and it's profound. And we're also, their largest trading partner. Like it's a $2 trillion relationship. And so we've got to manage that relationship, whether he likes it or not, these ups, these downs, these tantrums. He's like a baby whose rattle has been taken away. I don't know how you would navigate the many, many, many things that might give offense to him. He is a bully, and bullies, as we know, can dish it out, but they cannot take it. He's allowed to muse openly and constantly about turning Canada the 51st state. But the second that we say, well, maybe we need to talk to China, given that you are closing access to your market to us, he blows his stack. I mean, what are we to do? We have to pick our interest, pursue our interest, and we can't be worried about how he reacts, because he reacts so unpredictably and so capriciously.
What do you think it means for the way in which the federal government not only navigates this, but communicates how they're going to navigate it to Canadians, James?
I actually thought Mark Carney had a very good moment on the tarmac as he left to go across the Pacific Ocean for his other bilateral meetings before he reaches the APEC conference. I thought he was pitch perfect. He just says, look, we know that the relationship with the United States has been cracked and broken, and there's a new reality that's in front of us. We're still negotiating it. Didn't frankly mention the ad directly, and I think that's the right approach. His job is to rise above it, and sort of the street fighter thing that Doug Ford is doing, I think, is actually beneficial in that regard. But look, the United States is also heading down a dead-end street. Kathleen just mentioned the auto sector and the Stellantis jobs that are being repatriated down into the United States. That's a dead-end street in the long-term dynamic of the United States. The United States is a country of 350 million people. There are 8 billion people on the planet. If you repatriate all the auto jobs to the United States, manufacture all the cars in the United States, and then at some point you're going to reach full market capacity in the United States, and you're going to actually want to sell those cars to the rest of the world. Canada is the 5th largest auto purchasing country on the planet. We buy 1.5 to 2 million cars per year. And if you're going to start cutting off your allies and trading partners out of spite because of a television ad, I think the auto workers in Michigan and the auto workers in Tennessee and the auto workers in South Carolina might just say, you might be annoyed by an ad, you might be annoyed by some things that Canada does in some sectors, but these are our jobs, and it's nice to build the cars in the United States, but you can only build them if you want to sell them to the rest of the world. And if all you're doing is going around and offending the rest of the world such that they won't buy our cars, it's kind of a dead-end street that you're on, Mr. President. And I think the rest of the Congress and the rest of the United States economy will wake up to that fact. Maybe in the midterms, certainly by 2028 in the next presidential campaign, it'll be a big topic about how limited Trumponomics is in terms of America's well-being in the long term.
And it's interesting because we haven't heard a ton from all aspects of business, including the auto sector yet. But what we did hear over the past week was huge pushback for, I would say, one of the first times to the tariff policy from soybean farmers and from cattle ranchers, all because of the sort of, wild economics of the policy that he's pursuing on tariffs with vis-a-vis Argentina and stuff. But still, like, vocal opposition, which is the thing that has been missing.
Yeah, and that's starting to get traction, and obviously Trump is potentially feeling threatened by that. But I mean, Canadians right now are focused on, two things. Yes, our politics, but also baseball. And it feels like, this U.S. and Canada, World Series, man, people are up for a fight, right? And the tension is starting to boil over, right? And so not only are people watching lots of baseball, but watching lots of politics. And I think that Carney has to watch himself, especially as he goes into the series of Asian summits. And will there be some kind of a bilat? I'm not sure. I don't know if there will or not, but if there'll be some kind of pull aside between him and Trump, because those always haven't been safe places for Canadian prime ministers in the past. There's been, a history with Prime Minister Trudeau not having a bad interaction at a similar summit once before. So how will Carney manage himself there, and how will he react to Trump's challenge?
Okay. Well, lots more for us to talk about. The Sunday strategy session is sticking around. We're going to turn our attention to the news that existed before Donald Trump blew up the headlines in Canada, both the budget and the federal conservative leader's comments on the RCMP. We'll talk about that next. Stay right there.